Let's start our 11th session on Buddhism 101. Let's put our hands together. Say sadhu 3 times.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Today we are going to be looking at one important idea in Buddhism. We have discussed about the nature of life, nature of existence, and a little bit of nature of self with the 5 aggregates. So it's a model that we are going to use, and I'm going to introduce you to a little complicated model that we necessarily don't have to stick to that. We just need to understand the idea behind it. When we see this table, it is a table, but when we deconstruct it into few items, we don't see the table-ness in that. So the same way that we have an identity, it's very much relevant to what we just spoke. We have an identity, but what is identity? Who am I really? Which part of me is really me, which contains that essence or meanness? So this is also one of the key concepts in Buddhist anatta, because classically, a lot of religions, a lot of faith traditions, they believe in a soul or an essence, which contains the core of you, the core that you call me. But the Buddhist view is that that core is not really something there. It's a conditional existence. When things are put together, it seems like there's something, but when you take out the conditions, you can't really call it that, like the table here. When the conditions are right, when we assemble the table, there is a table. You strip it down, you deconstruct it, you can't really call it a table. So if the table, in the ultimate sense, if there is no table, should the table be worried about all the things that people say about the table? For example, if people say, I don't like you, should the table be worried if there's no table? But today, let's look at this idea called the duality or the dualistic nature. Now, when we look at duality, we find a physical duality in the world. Physical duality in the sense that if you look at our body, we have a circulatory system. There's blood which is always dying, which is deconstructing, and there's a creation of blood cells in the bone marrow. So we are, in a way, our bodies are continuously dying, continuously generating. So we are in a nice balance of death and life. So when you're a kid, the life or the generation is a little more, so you grow. When you're an adult, it's sort of stable. The death and the generation are equal. But when you get old, there's muscle atrophy. You start dying more rather than generating. And you need Botox and all that, so your face gets smaller, shrunk, and wrinkled. That's nature, and it can be seen in anything outside in the world, and everything pretty much. If you take the planetary system, Moon is pulling this way, the Earth is pulling this way. Earth is trying to go out of its circular path because of the force, the centrifugal force, and the Sun is holding on to that. So there's a continuous duality wherever you see the chess game. There's one side black and white. They are trying to go in different directions, trying to achieve different objectives. If you look at the political system, there's left, right, and there's always 2 sides to it. There's a duality in anything pretty much we see. Pretty much in anything we see that there's an opposite nature. There's one nature, and there's a nature which is opposite to that. But then our most important focus here is not on the physical duality, but the dualistic nature of the mind. That our mind can be in continuous dualities. Sometimes we are very comfortable in our life. We love that comfort. But then that comfort can be very boring. So we want to be adventurous. And we move into that adventure, and that's too adventurous. And then we start coming back. So this famous saying that grass is always green on the other side. You want to go there, but when you go there, you want to come back again. Before COVID, I remember I have heard people saying, I hate working. I really wish that I could spent 5 days in my bed without doing anything. And then COVID happened. People were so depressed that they couldn't do anything. Right? They started reading books in the beginning, watching Netflix, but they ran out of all that. And they were at a point, we really need to go out. And then right after the COVID lockdown, you saw people, they were very angrily going on their vacation because they could not go. It was like revenge vacation, revenge for COVID. So we find that nature of mind where we want to move from one extreme to the other. I like to say that all of us in the world are very bipolar,
Yeah.
right? There's a clinical bipolarity. So the mind has this dualistic nature. We get depressed and we go into this euphoria. If you look at the dualistic nature, there's this very interesting phenomena with duality. For the duality to occur, there has to be harmony in duality. I mean, notice that nature. I mean, we blame that there's duality, there's good and bad, light and dark and all that. But they are actually friends. They are not foes. For the duality to exist, there has to be a union between that. Let's take a game of hockey, right? The two teams, they have completely two different objectives. One wants to score a goal on the other side. The other team wants to go on the complete opposite side. They have completely opposite objectives. Even the fans, they have completely opposite objectives. Although they have different objectives, completely opposite objectives, there is a rule of engagement where they have to be united in that. They need to believe, they need to adhere to the game's rules of the game. So if you take any duality, two different natures trying to pull their way into two different paths, although they look very different, there is a common way that they participate in that. Fire and not fire, right? There's a common participation. So this duality is also harmony. It's actually it's more emphasized on Taoist tradition. That's why I put this symbol, the yin and yang symbol. It's a fantastic example to say that there is duality in the world, but there's harmony also in that duality. Man and woman typically are very different in ways of thinking, but they live together. That's the beauty of it, right? So duality. So in Buddhism, duality is accepted, duality is noticed, the harmony in duality is also noticed, but then Buddhism goes into this other concept called the interdependence, dependent arising. This is one of the, if someone asks what would be the most original thought of Buddhism, it would be dependent arising. Because if you take the Noble Eightfold Path, it's not an original teaching, because you find the yogic tradition, which predates Buddhism, that also has an eightfold path called Ashtanga Yoga, which somewhat resembles the Noble Eightfold Path. If you take the four elements I was talking about, Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, the four main elements, there's a Pancha Mahabhuta in the Vedic study. So they are not the most original ideas, but interpretations of some of the old ideas. But dependent arising happened to be, I searched up and down in the Upanishad, Vedic philosophy and other contemporary philosophies. Dependent arising seems to be the most original Buddhist idea. So what is interdependency? Now, I don't know if you remember last full moon day, we had more people, right? Last full moon day. So that was the month where Buddhism reached Sri Lanka. So when Buddhism, one of the monks who was supposed to be who's the son of that time emperor, who was a monk, he went to Sri Lanka. He met the king, and then he wanted to check the wisdom of the king. Is the king in a position to understand Buddhism? Because Buddhism tends to be slightly on the philosophical side. It's a little deeper. So he wanted to check if that king can understand the philosophy behind that. So he asked a question. So he pointed towards a mango tree. Sri Lanka has a lot of mangoes, and that particular meeting spot is known to have a huge mango forest. So in that mango tree, he asked the monk asked the king, King, what do you call this tree? Sir, it's a mango tree. Do you find other trees than this mango tree? Yes, I do find other trees than mango tree. But let's stop it there. Now, these are, let's say, behind me there's a rose. Why do we call a rose a rose? Can someone tell me? Why do we call rose a rose?
It's a word, it's a signpost.
It's a sign, it's a symbol. We denote rose because they have the rose petals. There are certain, like the other day, Savani's little nephew, he asked a question, which came first, orange or orange? The color orange or the orange? Right? So, why is rose rose? Right? Now, to answer that question, many people would think that we call something a particular name. Of course, it's a convention, but when the convention started, it had particular characteristics. So, because of those characteristics, we call rose a rose, or an orange. But let's look at it this way. Assuming that, not assuming that we have, if I'm to go binary today, there's men and women. Let's forget the other denominations for a moment, to simplify it, not to discriminate, just to make it simple. There's men versus women, some form of an identification classically. So if we look at a man, why do we call man a man? We would say because they have certain biological features of a man. But then, assuming that we take out all the men in the society, and the rest would be like the society in Wonder Woman. Almost Wonder Woman.
Right.
They only have women. And we don't have to assume that somehow, it's a thought experiment, we deleted all the men in the society. The rest of the population, we don't want to call them women. We can use these, they, them, because there's no need of calling them women, because there's no distinction. There's only one type of identification. But we could call them beings, like humans. Humans. But why do we call humans humans? Why?
To make a distinction from, say, animals or other things.
Animals and other things. So humans exist because there are non-humans that we need to distinguish. If we delete all the non-humans, then we are ended up with some form. We don't have to call them humans anymore because there's only one species. We can call them beings. We could call them beings because there are non-being objects like the table. If we delete the tables, what do we call them? We have no word. So we are going from a duality to a more singularity. We could look at it that way. It doesn't happen in the normal world. It's always there's always another opposite nature. But isn't this nature of something predicated on the nature of something which is completely opposite to that? Even a name, right? We call this yellow not because it's truly yellow. There are non-yellow colors in the world, right? So it might look very simple when I earlier said, what's the reason for divorce? Marriage. Right? It's something like that, but it's a very profound notion that anything in the world, the duality of the world is actually not a duality. It's something which is based on the complete opposite nature of something else.
Even right at the quantum level.
Even right at the quantum level. At any physical level, in a materialistic level, energy level, or even our mind level. We can only experience euphoria because we have been sad. We can only be sad if we have become happy, right? You can only be frustrated if you have had a sense of achievement, right? So it is very interdependent. The dependent origination, the nature of one thing is predicated, it's dependent upon the nature of something completely different. Now, there's a beautiful verse in the Pali Canon which says this: Iti imasmin sati idam hoti. At the presence of something, you find an existence of that. When those conditions are taken out, you don't find it. So they are interdependent. Rather than saying they are there forever, something has a truly unique nature embedded into that. Rather than saying it that way, no, there is a nature that we of course can look at, see. There is a table. For sure there is a table. But that table, which part of that is the real table? Right? Or is it a dependent existence? Or it's a conditional existence? So that's the main idea behind interdependency, and that is applied to our next part. We looked at the 5 aggregates. So this, let me call it the model. This model is the model that we take to explain who I am. I am based on 5 aggregates, 5 things. And when you deconstruct into these 5 things, we won't be able to find a true myself. Now you might think, isn't this deconstruction a thought based? It's a logic. It's good in logic. I mean, when I say I can deconstruct a table, it's not logic because I can really do that. But can I deconstruct me into 5 forms? What do you think? Can we or cannot? We can if you want to. That is the lab of meditation. It happens in the laboratory of meditation. So if you really want to, you can practice different types of meditation where you understand these things separately. But it takes a little bit of effort and like a little bit of time, that type of meditation. So why this idea came up? Because at the time, this Buddha's time, it was a fantastic period where people have really done a lot of meditation. They have done a lot of mental experiments. So maybe in the modern day this is not so applicable because not a lot of people are so keen in meditation. In fact, I see most of the people, when they do meditation, they do it for their mental therapy, mental solace. Mental solace meditation is good. It's called samatha. But then this type of meditation is what the scientists do. They are not doing it for therapeutic purposes, they are doing it for research purposes. So I find most of the ascetics who lived at that time, they were hardcore researchers, they are neuroscientists. They are, in a way, they were carrying out a research, an empirical research on their mind, and they were trying to look into these different experiences and states of mind. And taking it further, and the other thing is that this 5 aggregate model is always like this elephant who's in a jigsaw puzzle. They don't exist independently. We can label them independently, but they don't exist independently. For example, the sensation, when we feel something good or bad or equanimous, there has to be someone who's accepting that sensation. So there has to be a consciousness. When you are not conscious, you can't have a sensation. And in order to have a distinction, let's say I distinguish between green and yellow, there has to always be some sort of a mental concept about what is yellow, what is green. Let's forget the colors. Hot and cold. Hot and cold might be a sensation on our body, but in order for us to interpret that, understand that, we need to also have a mental idea, like a conceptual idea of that hotness and coldness. So remember when we discussed the 5 aggregates, hotness and coldness is also a physical sensation, but it's also a mental concept. When I say hot, I have a feeling of hot, an understanding of hot.
Okay, but like the memory is a mental formation.
Memory in Buddhism doesn't map into any of these 5 categories directly, because this is actually memory in meditation is also not a more root idea. So let me put it this way. If you have to deconstruct a movie, the movie would be the first thing that we see. But if we go and deconstruct the movie, there's a filming process, there's an editing process, and there's a color grading, sound effects. So these 5 are like that. But memory is like the movie.
Okay.
So what we see now is a movie. The memory is a movie based on this, but it's still in the more upfront layer, more surface layer. But when you go down, you will
These
find
things are more basic than memory.
more. That's right, more basic than memory.
They are at a lower level.
Right.
Basically, a memory is already a construction of some of these
Correct. Correct.
conducts.
That's why, like we experience this reality, we can also close our eyes and relive a memory, which is very much like this. It's just slightly different to this. And the same way, if you are in a state of mind where you are hallucinating, right? You are also experiencing. We don't know whether we are hallucinating or not. Someone else would have to say, but we are experiencing a reality, and in that reality, if we drill down, if we deconstruct it, if we cut it into small pieces, then we get these in the most basic form. So that's why the 5 sensations. But the most important idea is that for the 5 sensations, 5 aggregates to work, they have to be present together. They can't independently exist. 1 or 2 cannot be there. Even 3 or 4 cannot be there. But at least 1 or more than 1 has to exist in unison. And a more serious, more complicated idea of that is called the Paticca Samuppada idea. Don't get overwhelmed with this. There are 12 stages in this. But these are not stages, which means that one happens after the other. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it can be a little confusing. There's a lot of jargon in it. I'll start from the yellow part. What is the cause for birth, decay, death, and all that? Right? So when you say, now we should not look it from the point of our physical existence. In our mind, there's a decay of the thought. There's a death of the thought. There's a death of an emotion. I was very happy. My happiness faded away. It changed. It changed to frustration. Right? So let's look at that rather than the real physical death and decay and all that. So we sort of established why that can be a suffering in the earlier slides, earlier presentations. So the cause of decay, death of a thought or an emotion is that there's an existence of the thought. Bhava. Right? What's the cause of existence? Because we have there's a clinging of some sort. We like to be happy. We were happy one day. We want to recreate that happiness. So we have this happiness again now because we wanted to have it again. And behind that, there's craving. And then again, I will quickly go through this. It becomes very complicated after that. For craving, there's sensation. When you feel something, good, bad, neutral, only if you sense something, there can be a craving. And the reason for sensation is because you have contact, passa, but contact with what? With the sense bases. Sense bases can be eye, ear, nose, etc., and the mind. And for the sense bases to be there, there has to be a name and a form. That's a little too complicated. So name means these 3 things put together in one box. Form is one, name and form. In order for name and form to be there, there has to be a consciousness. In order for consciousness to be there, there has to be a formation. Formation to be there has to be ignorance. Right? So this is called the Paticca Samuppada 12-step idea, but again it's not in the sense of steps because they are interdependent. I'll give you a quick example. Now you are seated on the chair and the chair is on the floor is on the basement, and the basement is on the foundation. This foundation is on the Barry's Lake property. Barry's Lake property is on the tectonic plate of the world. It's on another magma layer. It's on the core, so it goes. And the Earth is on the space-time fabric. So that is not happening one after the other. They are all happening simultaneously. Right? So that's why interdependency is not a sequential thought. It's happening together, interdependent, not happening one after the other. So that's why the Buddhist causality, this question was asked earlier, I think Colin asked, Buddhist causality is not a causality of one thing happening after the other. Right? That is called a different name. Pubbhe kata hetuvada. This is a result. The result is because of that cause. That is not Buddhist causality. Buddhist causality is slightly different. It's based on paticca There's a conditional existence, dependent arising. Now, why Buddhist thought is not based on, of course, when I say not Buddhist thought is based on, some of the Buddhist major denominations, they do accept and they believe in that causality based on the time. But why Buddha would say the Buddhist causality is not based on time is because, have you watched Interstellar, the movie? Watch the Interstellar movie. If you watch the Interstellar movie, yeah, you would understand that time is not linear.
Not at all.
Right? The causality, one happening sequentially because of something, applies if the time is linear. And Buddha, that's why I really like Buddha. He's one of the best, but at least logically, it's a very good logic. It's a very superior logic. There's hardly anything that you can say, well, this is wrong because of this. Because he has covered it so nicely. If the time is linear, we can say this happened because of a previous activity, previous occurrence. But if time is not linear, that logic doesn't apply. If it's circular or if it's non-linear. So Buddhist causality does not go into explain a genesis or an ending, but it's about what is the current condition, cessation of the condition, origin of the condition. That's it, right? And it's an interdependency. So again, don't get too overwhelmed with this idea. I will send you the note of it. Yeah.
It's helpful though when you speak of causality. One could start a discussion by saying cause and effect.
Right.
But that's too small a snippet. That's
Right.
too linear.
Correct.
I did this and this happened.
Correct.
There's so much more. It's a mesh network of,
Correct.
as your slide showed earlier, many things.
Many things, yeah. So cause and effect, that way, is one, but causality in Buddhism is based on the conditional existence and interdependency.
Right.
Interdependency. If to put into summary of the last 10 sessions that we did, we were looking at first the life in terms of our experiential reality. We were facing happiness, we were facing sadness, there's evaporation of happiness, there's something which seems to be good can be negative, but then we also looked at the physical suffering and the mental suffering. We did not really look at physical suffering, that would be the general practitioner's job, GP's job, the dentist and the physician, that would be their job. But then we looked at a little bit of mental suffering. That's also the psychologist and psychotherapist job, mental suffering. But that's a very, these two things are very much essential in our day-to-day life. So we looked at this thing called the noble suffering, which is slightly different and more philosophical, but also very practical way to understand the two sufferings. Dukkha dukkha, viparinama dukkha and sankhara dukkha. I don't want to go into detail in that. But then we slightly touched upon life based on who am I, me. So in order to explain me, I took two models, the five aggregates and the dependent arising. I am here due to certain conditions coming together and of their interdependent nature. Interdependent. And if I want to, I can break it down to 5, I can break it down to 2, I can break it down to 12. It's only a model, right? It's how you categorize it. It's like if we want to dissect our body and say our anatomy is limbs and the trunk and head, we can do that. But if we want to go further, we can divide it to muscles and skeleton, right? So it's a matter of how you define it. The idea is not getting stuck into 5 or 12 or 2 or whatever. The idea is that we can divide it to any number of things, but then they all have a conditional existence, interdependent existence. And therefore, that idea of a never changing, never evolving, consistent me is not a correct identification. That's the idea here. But then I'm trying to introduce you to this other idea, Samma Ditti and Samma Sati, of the Noble Eightfold Path. So we have a rough indication of what it is. What is noble seeking? Right? So noble seeking, if I'm to summarize, rather than, no one can remember 8 things, 8 of that, 8 of this. Buddhism, especially Theravada form, has a lot of numbers. 37 Bojjhanga, 5 of this, 7 of that. There's a lot of things. I tend to remember things, so I'm good with the numbers, but an average person who can't remember all these numbers, he can't get enlightened. That's not true. It's not the point to remember these academic numbers. But it's a very simple concept, Samma Ditti and Samma Sati. Now, Samma Ditti is usually translated as right view. Right? What is right view according to Buddhism? Yesterday I was at the KW festival and the Interfaith Grand River stall, and there was this beautiful Joy, you saw the poster there, right? Of all the world religions. And I was with a lot of interfaith friends. In fact, in this world there are about 4,700 official religions, and usually every religion would claim, my view is the right view. Right? So that's what the Buddhists would also say, right view is our view. But in early Buddhism, right view is looked at differently. Right view is very much associated with this idea, emptiness. This is the sense symbol for emptiness. What is right view? Buddha has never defined the right view in the Pali Canon. Well, Buddha didn't write the Pali Canon. But if you look at all the discussions which happened, right view was never described, but the wrong view, there are a lot of discussions about the wrong view. Right? Now, that brings us the question, what is a view? View, again, another synonym for view would be a belief. Belief, conclusion, paradigm, ideology, that would be the view. What I basically think about it. Right? In Buddhism, there's a fundamental difference between believing in and seeing. In Buddhism, it's not based on a belief, it's based on seeing. Passato janato. I saw it, I felt it, I clearly saw it with my insight, with my vipassana. I saw it. I'm not believing in it. So it's two different things. My belief is not based on an axiom, it's not based on an assumption, it's not based on inference. Right? It's seeing beyond that. So the wrong view would be, so the classic question, what happens to you after your death? That's a classic question. A lot of people will say, well, I'm going to reincarnate after that, if you are in the right geographical region, which is Indian subcontinent. If you ask the people from the European subcontinent, they would say, well, once I'm dead, I'm going to go to the purgatory, I'm going to be judged, and then I might go into, depending on what I did, to the eventual everlasting hell or eternal damnation or eternal heaven. If you ask someone even further away, who's more into science, what will happen to you after your death? Well, I'm going to be gone into carbon, hydrogen and nitrogen. That's it. There's no continuation of soul. Soul is here and then I'm gone. So those are ideas. But if you ask any of these 3 people, do they know that for sure? No, I just think that way. I believe in that. I have certain either rational or either empirical evidence, that is why I believe in that, but it's not a complete 100% truth, I know. I don't know it for sure.
It does get clouded though, right? If you listen to an interview by somebody who's had a near-death experience, right. They swore they saw it.
Right. There's a lot of things that we can gain from our 5 senses. Eye, ear, nose, we get those 5 senses. And we can also, apart from those 5 senses, we have a lot of things coming in from our mind called logic, rationale. But again, if we look into the 5 senses and the rationale, there can be errors in those. There can be flaws. For example, We are tasting something, it's a very good smell and nice aroma, but during COVID we are sniffing the same thing, there's no aroma. So my five senses, five senses are naturally flawed and they are limited. When I look at the world, it's green, blue, but when I have jaundice, they have slight yellow tint, right? Based on what is in our mind, we see a different reality. I was talking about this, we were talking about people who are getting old and Alzheimer's and all that yesterday, and I was sharing this experience of one of my good friends. He's very old. He has gotten a tumor. The tumor is pressing his brain, and then he acted a little different, little paranoid and all that. That's not his true reality. It's his conditional reality because of his conditions change. So our five senses can be flawed. Therefore, the data and the conclusions we take based on this equipment, are they 100% accurate? Maybe they're 99%, but no one can say they are 100% accurate. That is not even the main reason. That's not they are flawed. They are limited. With our eyes, we can only look at color between infrared and ultraviolet. That's it. But is that the only colors in the world? No, it expands all the way beyond ultraviolet, beyond infrared. But we can only see that strip of things. We can only hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. That's it. Is that all sound in the world? No, that's again so much. There's only so much thought that we can think. Is that all thought that we can think? No. A higher being can think in higher dimensions, probably. A lower being in one dimension can think in a very different manner. But we can't think in one dimension. We can think in 4 dimensions. Our thinking is limited to 2D and 3D. Does that make sense? Can we visualize a dot in 1D? Can we visualize a line in 1D? We can't. We can visualize a line, but the line has a width. So it is not 1D, it's 2D. We cannot visualize 1D. If we take a photo of a 3D object, it comes into a photograph which is 2D. Right? But what is 1D? We can't.
Not even in 2D.
What is 1D?
The line is something, and that's something that the line has a
Width.
width.
So it is not 1D, it's 2D. So 1D is an idea that we can...
No, on 1D and a universe in 1 dimension and 2 dimensions, they are just like thought abstractions, thought abstractions. We can't even understand that abstraction. We can't understand 4D also. Again, if you watch that movie Interstellar. Because what happens is when you say, okay, a sheet of paper is 2-dimensional.
Right.
It's easier to think that way, but it's not.
Right. So in Interstellar, they have taken a lot of time in creating a black hole. That's when Stephen Hawking and some of the scientists, they worked on the image of a black hole. So that movie is really with a lot of scientific research. Mm-hmm. And in a black hole, you would see the future or the past. Mm-hmm. We don't want to go there again, but later we have tea and we'll explain the science behind that. So that's 4D. The point is that we have a limited rationale, we have a limited sensing capacity. The conclusions we take based on those are going to be slightly flawed or very flawed, very wrong. So why do we want to get into conclusions? Why do we want to hang on to beliefs? Why don't we have beliefs? We can't discard beliefs, they are there. Why don't we recognize them as beliefs and then look at the world from a more relaxed perspective? Not hanging and clinging on to those beliefs, but with a slightly like a more open, flexible approach. So that's the key in Sammaditthi. We are not going to be very hardcore. So I will go into the Eightfold Path quickly and then try to put it into a few categories. So Sammaditthi is the forerunner for everything. It starts with Sammaditthi, and I don't want to pay attention to the middle part, right intention, I do not want to go into very detail, maybe on a different time. But then I can divide this into few categories. The first part is right view and right resolve, right intention, samma sankappa. Now that is based on wisdom, panya, right? Now I will tell you why the other three, right speech, right action, right livelihood, they are more on the ethical conduct. They have it, for sure, it has to be reinforced with an ethical conduct. But imagine if you do not have the first part, then you only have an ethical conduct. Ethical conduct is very cultural. What is right speech? In Sri Lanka, where I come from, there's a coastal area. People are known to use very strong slangs there. They would even talk to their parents in the slang language, which would be very taboo in some other parts of the country, within that country. Right? So something which is very taboo in one country is very normal in one country. Right? I see that I was returning from India. One of the cultural shocks people get. The first time I went abroad to a country where there's white people, right, is Germany. So when I got down in Frankfurt airport, the first thing I saw that this is 2000, early 2000. In front of the Frankfurt airport, car stopped. A guy came out and he kissed another guy, which was a sort of a cultural shock for me because I haven't seen gay display of affection in public. Yeah. Right? I have never seen it in Sri Lanka. So that was a bit of a shock to me. I was wondering how this happens too. And then I was hanging around in the Frankfurt Park. I saw a lot of couples kissing. It's very normal, heterosexual, homosexual. But then there was a signage on the park saying, if you urinate in public, that's a fine of 85 euros. That's bad. But it's not the 85 euros, it's a very frowned upon activity. It's a taboo thing to do there. And then I go back to the Asian countries, especially India is a little known to that. Public display of affection is very bad. It's very taboo. But it's very normal for people to urinate in public. It's completely normal. It's not you have to go when you have to go, right? There's nothing wrong with it. Even in Australia, I noticed that I was late for something and there was a pilot. He said, mate, go to the bush. So in some countries it's okay, but in some countries it's not okay. And in some countries, public display of affection is okay, but some it's very frowned upon. Even holding hand is taboo in Saudi Arabia if you are not married to each other. So ethical conduct can be very culturally based. So in Buddhism, it's beyond the mere ethical conduct. You're not sticking to a rule book, a set of values and principles. That is not the idea of Buddhism. You are doing that as a reinforcement, as a to set a better setting or a better, like when we come to meditate, we put a sign saying we are meditating, please be silent. So that's to create a more conducive environment, not because we just want to be silent, right? So this sila or the ethical conduct in Buddhism is to create a conducive environment for your further investigation, which is the samadhi. Now I do not have a word in English to explain samadhi, so that's why I put question marks. People say right concentration, right meditation. I do not agree with any of these words. Let's call it samadhi for the time being. It's easier that way without polluting it with words. So there's some sort of a right effort, certain things that you do. And then there's right mindfulness. And then there's samadhi. Again, I put a question mark there. So that is sort of the culmination, the completion or the 100% achievement, or when I say achievement it's wrong, but attaining the highest level of samadhi is the idea enlightenment in Buddhism. But it starts with the sammaditthi, right view. Right view is not adopting a new value set. It's knowing that I have a value set and I have taken a conclusion based on limited data, limited instruments, limited rationale and logic. Therefore, I know that if I have to remove this, I'm ready to remove that. So in Buddhism, the Dhamma or the teaching is always referred to as a canoe or a boat. You take it to cross the lake, but when you cross the lake, and you don't have to carry it with you all the time. It's only for a specific purpose. So even sati, mindfulness, is a tool in Buddhism. It's not an ultimate end of Buddhism.
Sorry, does the word samadhi get close to the word meditative or not?
Samadhi, meditation is a very limited word. Very limited. Because meditation refers to something that you are doing. Samadhi is not something that you are doing. Samadhi is usually known to be a state of mind. You are in samadhi. Like you are peaceful. Are you doing peaceful? Or are you in peace?
Oh.
Right? So that's why I don't find the correct word to explain that. It's different to a doing of something. So Samma Vayama, that is a doing, right effort.
You know, the third group,
Right?
what I see is generally classified as mental training. Wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental training.
Mental training, correct.
Mental training.
Correct. So that's why I think mental training is a word which is used often. I don't want to call samadhi mental training. Right? Let's take an example. The flowers are coming, but are we taking out flowers, or are we just watering the plant and planting the plant, putting the fertilizer to the plant? So like that, samadhi is like that flower which blooms. It's not our doing. Although we have done something which could cause samadhi. We create the conditions. We help it. We use the ethical conduct, virtue, sila. That's our doing. And that doing comes from an initial understanding.
So another right speech and right action, right livelihood, I find it has more depth in Buddhist teaching than whether it's correct words or wrong words, or whether it's a bad word or a good word. The way I know is that it's right speech, it's true. If you are speaking the truth, it's the right speech. But even to speak the truth, it shouldn't hurt anybody, or it shouldn't cause any harm to anybody. It has to be the right time to say the truth. Like even the right speech, I don't find that it limits by the geography or the society. The right speech taught in Buddhism, I think it's more towards advancing you, as you said, towards wisdom.
Correct. So, yeah, that's a good point. We were looking at the golden poster yesterday. I'll get to that. The golden poster is a beautiful poster, an interfaith poster. I put it on the front there. It's about all the religions talking about the same thing. So one thing that you find in all religions in the golden rule is that do your action with the mindset, what if someone else do it to you? You find it in Bible, you find it in Baha'i, in Buddhism, Udana Varga, wherever you find the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
Base your action based on with the idea, what would you feel if someone else does it to you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So now right speech, when somebody said we need to make sure the same ground rule that my speech is not to hurt someone, it's not to annoy someone, and it's again for my spiritual advancement. Now there are two aspects to it. When Buddha said anicca, dukkha, anatta, some Hindus got really offended, right? So sometimes we can even tell the truth which could offend people. So that's one side of it. But then the more deeper right speech is being truthful, being 100% truthful. You don't fake, you don't lie. But then what is lying? There are two layers to lying. One thing is the right virtue of lying. I saw a plant outside. If someone asks me, I'm always going to say I saw a plant outside. Now that is not lying. But in order to tell the truth, like the correct truth, you need to know the truth. So raga and dvesha are things which we can find easily. the aversion and the greed. But what about the ignorance? Can we tell the truth of the world? Can we speak about the truth of the world if we don't know the truth of the world? So again, this eightfold path, they are again interdependent. So it's not just you complete one session, you complete right view, and then you graduate to right intention, and then you get graduate to right speech. That idea is very great. In a very beginner setting, early setting, that's very true, and in a social setting, that's very true. We should not hurt people. We should not cause disturbance. We should be beneficial to the others as well as to me. But if you go further down, can I talk the truth of the world? Now again, if we was talking to another common friend, Jay, yesterday, what he said was he's a humanist. So humanist, sort of broken from the Unitarian group of Christianity. Humanists are called rational humanists. So what they believe is that every faith tradition, there are really good people. There are so nice, righteous, kind, benevolent people, and there are really bad people. Right? So it's not a matter of the faith, right? There are good people and bad people. But then any faith, any believer of any faith would have really nice people who would not want to disturb the peace, who would not want to hurt. It's not only in Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Christianity, Islam, any religion, right? Any religion would have people who would not want to hurt people or disturb people. But then what about the truth of the world? They can be believing that the world is a flat world and still can be very good. They can be very nice.
Loopy, but nice.
Right? So there's this third component of ignorance. That's a very important component of ignorance in Buddhism. That is why we need to have that understanding, which would be a back and forth. It will be a trial and error. So we do the sila without any understanding. But if you keep sticking into a set of rules, virtues, it's not going to take you very further. You'll be just stuck in that. Then you go back to your thought. Why am I doing that? You start questioning. So you get a little bit of samadhi. And then you also come to your right effort, right mindfulness. You cultivate that. So it's a continuous process of having all these components together to a final, final objective is a wrong word, but let me put it that way, with the idea of attaining samadhi, samma samadhi. So samma samadhi is also known as the enlightenment or the emancipation, ending of the three defilements, ending of the three unwholesome roots, the pig, rooster and the snake in Buddhism.
Yeah, I'm just coming back to Sama Samadhi. I'm trying to understand that. I always thought it was concentration. Does that fall short?
No, that's very wrong actually. Samma Samadhi for concentration is an absolutely wrong idea, both in Buddhism and in Hinduism.
Really?
Because the word for concentration is called dharana. Both in Hinduism, Sanskrit and samadhi is not the concentration. That's why it's sort of not the best way to translate it. What happens when you concentrate your mind? You can be in a state of concentration. What if someone comes and kicks you, gives you a little push? Concentration is gone.
Right.
And you're back. That Joey has a t-shirt saying, I'm meditating, so don't piss me off.
Yeah, right.
That is samma concentration. You can be very concentrated. Let's look at we met this wonderful artist who was doing very intricate designs on silk.
Yeah.
So she must be having a lot of concentration. Right? That's extreme concentration. Imagine a kid comes and spills the coffee mug. She's going to be very mad probably. But she was in the concentration. So samadhi is not something like that.
So I ran it in a chat,
Okay.
my good friend chat, and I'm just going to read it quick. Sama Samadhi is concentration that arises with ethical intention and mindfulness. It is not just focus,
Right.
but wholesome, balanced, and clear concentration that's aligned with wisdom and ethical living. Does that come closer?
It is better than the previous answer.
Okay.
But keep asking chat, because chat is also feeding based on what is there.
Right.
So There's a specific word for concentration. In Ashtanga Yoga, dharana means concentration. But dharana will be a good path for you to go to samadhi. So samadhi is different to concentrating. So that's why I didn't want to even call it mental training or meditation. We'll just call it samadhi for simplicity. For simplicity.
Okay.
Okay, so let's end our session here. Let's put our hands together. We have been listening to these ideas, but these ideas are not to conclude. These ideas are only to further research, further seek. In fact, it's called the noble seeking. Arya Paryeshana, noble seeking. These ideas are only guidance, they are only frameworks, they are only different models for us to do our own seeking from the books, from outside, but most importantly from our own self. It's a more introspective, noble seeking. So let's wish that may all beings be able to comfortably with the free physical nature, with the free mental nature. What I meant by that, may they be physically be free of suffering, may they be free of mental suffering, and may they have the time and the space and the comfort to get into this noble seeking and find the liberation of their conditioned mindset. Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitatta. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.